I signed what I believed were standard refinance documents on a humid Tuesday afternoon in our suburban Atlanta home. The ones my husband of 32 years slid across the granite island with that familiar, reassuring smile. 3 weeks later, process servers handed me divorce papers at the front door, while 2 sheriff's deputies stood by to oversee the immediate freeze on every joint account we'd ever held. By the end of that same day, $487,000 had already vanished from the retirement portfolios I had funded with 28 years of bookkeeping for our family construction firm. Wire transfers executed with signatures that looked exactly like mine, but weren't. My name had been forged on deeds, transferring the lake house and the commercial warehouse into an LLC controlled solely by him. Our 2 adult children, Marcus and Lauren, didn't answer a single call. Instead, they had already changed the locks on the house I'd paid the mortgage on for the last decade. That was the moment my life didn't just crack. It was professionally dismantled. I sat on the curb outside the only home I'd known for 30 years, with a single suitcase and the clothes on my back. The August heat pressed down like a verdict. My phone kept buzzing with notifications from accounts now showing 0 balances. The bank had already flagged the joint checking as compromised, but the fraud alerts came too late. Every credit card linked to our shared history had been maxed out and cancelled in my name. I drove to the cheapest extended stay motel off I-85 with $217 in cash I'd hidden in an old coat pocket. The night clerk looked at me like I was another cautionary tale. The next morning, I learned the full scope. My soon-to-be ex had filed an ex parte motion for temporary guardianship, attaching doctored medical records claiming early cognitive decline. Marcus and Lauren signed affidavits describing me as confused and unstable, claiming I'd been forgetting basic financial responsibilities for months. They wanted control of what little remained so they could protect the family assets. The judge granted a hearing date 2 weeks out. In the meantime, they moved into the lake house I still legally co-owned and posted pictures on social media. Lauren lounging by the dock with a glass of rosé. Marcus grilling steaks on the deck I'd designed. The caption on one read, "Finally taking care of what Mum worked so hard for." I stared at those photos until my eyes burned. 32 years of marriage, building a business from a 2-man crew into a 7-figure operation, raising 2 children who never wanted for anything. And this was the return on investment, being erased while still breathing. They didn't stop at money. Within days, flying monkeys, old friends and distant relatives started calling. Each one delivered the same scripted concern. They said I was clearly having a breakdown, that the divorce was my idea, that I'd threatened self-harm, so they had no choice but to step in. Lauren left a voicemail that played on speaker in my motel room while I ate cold takeout. She told me I should be grateful they were handling everything because I clearly couldn't be trusted with decisions anymore. Her voice dripped with that practiced pity that narcissists perfect. Marcus texted a single line. "Dad says the guardianship is for your own good. Stop fighting it." I didn't cry. Not then. The tears came later in the shower of that motel room that smelled of bleach and regret. But by sunrise, I had made a decision. I would not go gentle into the nursing home nightmare they had planned. I still had copies of every tax return, every business ledger, and every bank statement from the last 15 years stored in a safety deposit box they didn't know existed. I started photographing everything on my phone, time-stamping each image. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for a Thursday. I showed up in the only decent outfit I still owned, hair pulled back tight, carrying a folder that felt like body armor. They sat on the other side of the courtroom like a united front. My ex in the navy suit I'd bought him for our 30th anniversary, Marcus in a tie that cost more than my current motel bill, Lauren scrolling her phone until the judge entered. Their attorney painted me as erratic, financially irresponsible, a danger to myself. They submitted bank records showing the drained accounts as proof I couldn't manage money. I said nothing during their presentation. I simply waited. When my turn came, I handed the judge printouts of the forged signatures and the wire transfer authorizations. I explained how the LLC they used to hide marital assets had been formed 3 months before the divorce filing, using my social security number without consent. The judge's eyebrows rose. He ordered a forensic accountant review and continued the guardianship hearing. For the first time in weeks, I saw something flicker across my ex's face. Uncertainty. But that small win wasn't enough. I was still broke, still one step from the street, and they still held the deeds. That night, scrolling through a private Facebook group for women recovering from marital financial abuse, I found a single post that changed everything. A woman described an organization called Glee. Invitation only, vetted for high net worth survivors of exactly this kind of coordinated betrayal. No public website, no ads, just a secure link and a vetting process that took 48 hours. I applied at 2:17 a.m. By the following evening, a secure video call connected me to a woman named Elena, whose calm voice carried the weight of someone who had seen hundreds of cases like mine. She listened without interruption while I laid out the timeline. When I finished, she said 3 words that felt like oxygen. "We can fix this." Within 72 hours, Glee had assigned me a team. A forensic accountant already digging into the shell LLCs, a family law attorney licensed in Georgia and ready to file counterclaims for financial elder abuse. And then came the part that still feels surreal. 5 bodyguards rotating in shifts, all former federal agents, operating under strict non-disclosure. They didn't wear suits or look obvious. One drove a plain silver sedan and parked 2 spaces down. Another posed as a maintenance worker at the motel. Their presence was quiet, invisible, and absolute. The first package arrived by courier. New temporary identification documents under a protected identity program. A burner phone with encrypted apps, and instructions to begin asset relocation into an irrevocable trust I would control solely. Glee fronted the legal fees with the understanding of full repayment once assets were clawed back. They moved what remained of my personal retirement, $41,000 I'd managed to shield, into the trust within 48 hours. I sat in the motel room that night with the new documents on the cheap laminate table. The red blinking light of the Ring camera they'd installed on the door, the only movement in the dark. For the first time since the papers were served, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. They thought they had buried me. They had no idea I was already rising, armed with paperwork, protected by professionals, and ready to drop the hammer that would shatter every lie they had built. The days after that first court hearing blurred into a grinding cycle of survival and silent fury. I stayed in room 214 of the Pinewood Extended Stay, where the air smelled perpetually of old cigarettes and industrial cleaner. My remaining cash had dwindled to $217, and the front desk required payment every Sunday in cash or money order. I ate 1 meal a day from the dollar menu at the gas station across the interstate, washing it down with lukewarm tap water. Meanwhile, my ex and the children treated the lake house like their personal resort. Marcus used passwords I had trusted him with years earlier when he helped manage the family business books. He drained another $94,000 from my individual IRA that I had foolishly kept linked to our old joint filing system. Lauren, who still had access to the shared cloud drive from when she lived at home, downloaded every scanned tax document and forwarded them to their attorney. They submitted supplemental affidavits to the court, claiming I had exhibited paranoid behavior and was hiding assets from the marital estate. The guardianship petition gained traction. Their lawyer requested an emergency mental competency evaluation, citing fabricated incidents where I supposedly wandered the neighborhood confused at night. I watched it all unfold through the cheap laptop I bought at a pawn shop. The flying monkeys arrived in waves. My former best friend from the PTA called, her voice thick with concern that sounded rehearsed. She said the children had told her I was refusing treatment for early dementia, and that the divorce was my way of punishing the family for trying to help. Another relative texted screenshots of Lauren's private stories, showing the lake house deck newly furnished with outdoor furniture I had paid for with business profits. The caption read something about finally enjoying the fruits of hard family labor. They tagged mutual friends, building a narrative that painted me as the unstable one who had walked away from everything. The humiliation burned deeper than the hunger. I had co-signed every loan that built our construction company from a truck and a toolbox into contracts worth millions. I had managed the payroll, the insurance, the subcontractor payments for 3 decades. Now I was the villain in their story, the mother who apparently lost her mind the moment retirement loomed. My ex sent a single certified letter through his attorney demanding I vacate any claim to the commercial warehouse, citing the forged deed transfer as legitimate. The letter included a copy of the LLC operating agreement with my forged signature, dated 6 months earlier. I spent nights cross-referencing bank statements spread across the motel bed like yellowed crime scene photos. The pattern was meticulous. Small transfers at first, $8,200 here, $12,400 there, always under thresholds that wouldn't trigger immediate bank flags. Over 26 months, they had siphoned $487,000 total, routing portions through shell LLCs registered in Delaware with addresses that led back to a P.O. box my ex controlled. Marcus had even opened a joint account in my name at a credit union I had never visited, using my social security number and a scanned driver's license from an old business filing. The isolation was the worst part. Friends stopped returning calls after the 3rd round of concerned texts from Lauren. One neighbor left a voicemail saying she hoped I got the help I needed and that the children were only acting out of love. Love. The word tasted like battery acid. These were the same children I had paid private college tuition for, co-signed cars for, and bailed out of credit card debt twice. Now they were positioning themselves as my caretakers while looting what remained. I hit absolute bottom on a Thursday evening. The motel manager slipped an eviction notice under my door, standard 30-day warning for non-payment after the next week. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress with the paper in my hands. The red blinking light of the security camera I had installed, with Bubble Glee's help, the only steady thing in the room. My hands shook, not from fear anymore, but from the cold calculation forming in my mind. I no longer wanted explanations. I wanted their world to collapse with the same surgical precision they had used on mine. That was when the Bubble Glee support accelerated. Elena scheduled daily secure calls. The forensic accountant they assigned, a sharp woman named Carla with 20 years tracing hidden marital assets, had already subpoenaed preliminary records on the Delaware LLCs. She identified 3 additional shell companies my ex had used to park equipment and receivables from the construction business. The Bodyguards rotated invisibly. One of them, a quiet man who introduced himself only as Reyes, left a fresh burner phone and a manila envelope containing printed chain of custody forms for every document I photographed. Another kept watch from a nondescript SUV in the parking lot, ensuring no surprise visits from Marcus or Lauren. I began the silent setup in earnest. I drove to a public library 40 miles away to avoid any location tracking on my old devices. There, I scanned every remaining business ledger and uploaded them to the encrypted Glee portal. Carla's team traced $312,000 in diverted business profits that should have been marital property. They flagged the power of attorney my ex had tricked me into signing during a routine estate planning session 2 years earlier, the one he later used to authorize transfers without my direct knowledge. The children sensed something shifting. Lauren called the motel front desk, pretending to be a concerned daughter, and tried to get my room number. The front desk, following Glee's protocol, gave her nothing. Marcus showed up at the property management office of the commercial warehouse demanding access, only to be told the locks had been changed per my attorney's instructions. Their love-bombing texts started arriving on the new burner. Messages about family therapy, about how they missed me, about how Dad was willing to reconcile if I dropped the paranoia. I read each one, screenshot them for the court file, and felt nothing but ice. By the end of that second week in the motel, I had assembled a binder 3 inches thick, forged signatures highlighted in red, wire transfer logs with timestamps, affidavits from the original bank officers who confirmed the signatures did not match my verified samples. The guardianship hearing had been continued again, but this time the judge ordered both parties to produce full financial disclosures. My ex's side stalled, claiming complexity. I smiled at the delay because every day they delayed gave Carla's team more time to map the complete fraud. I stood at the motel window one night, watching the interstate traffic streak by, the half-empty cup of gas station coffee gone cold on the windowsill. The eviction notice still sat on the counter, but now it felt like a relic from a previous life. Glee had already secured temporary housing in a safe location, under my new protected identity. The irrevocable trust documents were being prepared, ready to receive every asset we clawed back. They thought they had turned me into a broken woman with no recourse. They had only succeeded in turning me into the architect of their undoing. The quiet discovery didn't arrive with trumpets or tears. It came at 2:17 a.m. in that bleach-stinking motel room, while I scrolled through a private support group on a burner phone Reyes had slipped under my door the night before. A single anonymous post caught my eye. A woman in her late 50s, describing how her husband and adult sons had forged deeds, drained IRAs, and filed for guardianship using falsified therapist notes. She mentioned an organization that operated in total secrecy. Glee. Invitation only. Vetted for survivors of coordinated financial elder abuse with 7-figure marital estates. No public footprint. No victim-blaming counselors. Just results. I submitted the encrypted application form at 2:41 a.m., attaching redacted scans of the forged refinance papers and the first batch of wire transfers. 48 hours later, Elena's secure video call connected through 3 proxy servers. Her face was calm on the screen, the background a nondescript office with a single abstract painting. She listened as I walked her through the timeline. The $487,000 in fraudulent transfers, the Delaware LLCs, the ex parte guardianship motion, the children's affidavits claiming I was mentally unfit. When I finished, she didn't offer sympathy. She offered architecture. "We can fix this," she said flatly. "But you follow protocol to the letter. No contact with them unless we direct it. No social media, no shared locations. We move your remaining funds into an irrevocable trust today. We assign protection immediately. And we begin building the forensic case that will bury them. Within 6 hours, a courier in plain clothes delivered the first package to the motel's side entrance. Inside, a new temporary identity packet under the Bubble Glee protection program, complete with a reissued social security card, flagged for fraud monitoring, a Georgia driver's license with a controlled address, and medical records that explicitly contradicted their doctored filings. Reyes introduced himself properly that night. 6'2", salt and pepper hair, eyes that had clearly seen worse than greedy families. He installed additional cameras covering every angle of the parking lot and showed me the panic button disguised as a key fob. 2 more bodyguards rotated in unmarked vehicles, one posing as a long-term guest 3 doors down, another handling perimeter sweeps. Their presence was ghostly. I never saw the same face twice in the same shift, yet I felt the net tighten around me like armor. Carla, the forensic accountant, joined the next video call with screen-shared spreadsheets already populated. She had traced $312,000 in diverted construction profits through 3 shell LLCs, each layered with my forged electronic signatures. The power of attorney my ex had me sign during that so-called estate review 2 years earlier. She flagged 17 unauthorized uses, each timestamped and cross-referenced against bank metadata. Marcus's drainage of my IRA. The credit union had logged the access from an IP address registered to the lake house. Lauren's cloud downloads? Server logs proved she accessed files after I was locked out of the marital home. I spent the next 10 days in silent setup mode, moving like a ghost myself. I drove the nondescript sedan Bubble Glee provided, registered under the new identity, to public libraries and FedEx stores 40 and 60 miles away. I duplicated every remaining business ledger, every subcontractor payment record, every cancelled check from the company accounts I had personally managed. Carla's team subpoenaed preliminary records on the LLCs and identified 2 additional accounts my ex had opened in my name at regional banks, each holding redirected receivables totaling another $68,000. The bodyguards ensured no tails. When Marcus drove past the motel twice one afternoon in his leased Range Rover, Reyes intercepted him at the entrance with a quiet word, and the man left without ever reaching my door. The children escalated their campaign. Lauren left 3 voicemails on the old number, each one dripping with that saccharine concern. She claimed Dad was worried sick, that the guardianship was only temporary until I stabilized, that the family missed me at Sunday dinners. Marcus sent texts through a mutual cousin, photos of the lake house with new dock furniture, asking if I remembered building it together. Each message was screenshot, time-stamped, and uploaded to the Bubble Glee evidence vault. Their flying monkeys kept calling old friends, spinning the narrative that I had abandoned the family and was now making wild accusations out of spite. One former neighbour actually showed up at the motel asking for me by my real name. The bodyguard on duty turned him away politely but firmly, citing a standing no-contact directive. I sat at the laminate table one rain-soaked evening with fresh printouts spread before me. Yellowed receipts, bank statements marked in red, chain of custody forms signed by Carla. The irrevocable trust documents had been executed that morning. What little I still controlled, $41,000 in a shielded annuity, plus the clawback targets, was now locked behind a legal structure they could never touch. Bubble Glee had fronted the filing fees and the first round of private investigators who confirmed the commercial warehouse was still generating $14,700 monthly in rental income, funneled straight into my ex's personal account. The tension in the air felt like a live wire. They sensed movement. My ex's attorney filed a motion to compel my appearance at a mental competency evaluation, attaching new affidavits from the children, claiming I had threatened self-harm in texts they had conveniently manufactured. The judge set the date for 3 weeks out. Elena's team smiled at that delay on our next call. Every extra day gave us more forensic depth. Carla had already located the crypto wallet my ex used to park $91,000 in diverted funds, traced through blockchain analysis that would hold up in federal court. I stood at the window, watching rain streak down the glass. The half-empty bourbon I'd allowed myself sitting untouched beside the manila envelope of new identity papers. The red light on the security camera blinked steadily. For the first time since the divorce papers landed, the weight on my chest wasn't despair. It was focus, cold, surgical, and absolute. They had built their house of cards on my forged signatures and my children's betrayal. I was about to hand them the match. The fortress rose in silence, one encrypted document at a time. Glee didn't waste motion. Within 72 hours of my acceptance, the irrevocable trust was executed under Georgia law, and a protective order that shielded it from any future marital claims. I became the sole beneficiary and trustee of an entity that now held the $41,000 annuity I had salvaged, plus every clawback target Carla's team had mapped. The trust was structured with spendthrift provisions and a corporate trustee in a jurisdiction that made discovery nearly impossible for civilian litigants. My ex's power of attorney, once his favourite weapon, became worthless paper against this new wall. The new identity settled around me like custom armour. The protected social security number triggered automatic fraud alerts on any attempt to use the old one. The driver's licence carried a controlled residential address routed through a private mail facility. Glee relocated me from the Pinewood extended stay to a secure, furnished town home in a gated community 40 minutes north, title held by the trust. No forwarding address, no utility bills in my old name. Reyes and the 4 other bodyguards rotated in a seamless 5-man detail. They moved like shadows, never inside the unit unless invited, always scanning perimeters, changing vehicles every shift. One drove a white work van with fake magnetic signage for a plumbing company. Another ran trail runs in the green space behind the complex at dawn, earpiece barely visible. Their presence didn't comfort me. It calibrated me. I was no longer prey. Carla's forensic deep dive accelerated. She recovered another $127,000 in diverted receivables that had been funneled through the Delaware LLCs into my ex's personal brokerage. Blockchain records pinned $91,000 in cryptocurrency to a wallet he controlled, but had opened using my old tax identification data. The commercial warehouse, still generating $14,700 monthly, was now subject to a lis pendens notice filed by my new counsel. The lake house deed, though fraudulently transferred, carried a cloud that prevented any clean sale. Every morning I reviewed fresh reports on the secure tablet they provided, highlighted wire logs, IP addresses tracing back to Marcus's laptop, Lauren's cloud access timestamps showing downloads after I had been locked out. They felt the shift, but couldn't name it. That ignorance made them frantic. Lauren's voicemails grew more frequent on the old number I kept active only for evidence collection. She spoke in that honeyed tone about how the family was falling apart without me, how Dad had been crying at night, how they all wanted to drop the guardianship if I would just come home and talk. Marcus sent photos through a burner app, images of the lake house at sunset, the grill still smoking, asking if I remembered teaching him to fillet bass on that dock. My ex's attorney filed a motion claiming I was evading service, demanding the court compel my location. The judge denied it after my counsel submitted the forensic preliminary report showing pattern fraud. The denial hit their side like a brick through glass. I watched the escalation from the townhome's second-floor window one October evening, the scent of fresh-cut grass drifting through the screen, while a half-empty glass of Cabernet rested on the sill. Reyes stood near the community gate in a maintenance uniform, pretending to trim hedges. When Marcus's Range Rover cruised past the entrance twice in 1 hour, the guard shack turned him away without explanation. Lauren tried the same the next afternoon, arriving with a bouquet of grocery store flowers and a story for the leasing office about surprising her mother. The bodyguards logged every plate number, every timestamp, every failed approach. Each incident fed the harassment file that would support a restraining order. The love bombing reached its peak on a Sunday. A mutual cousin called the new burner. Somehow they had obtained the number and left a long message about how the children were planning an intervention because they loved me so much. The cousin's voice cracked on cue, reciting lines clearly scripted by Lauren. I let the message play on speaker while I reviewed Carla's latest spreadsheet. $619,400 total misappropriated across 29 separate transactions. I forwarded the recording to Elena with one note: add to the evidence log. Inside the trust, assets began moving. The warehouse rental income was rerouted to the trust account, effective the first of the next month. Carla prepared quitclaim deeds to unwind the fraudulent transfers, ready to file the moment we had the court's green light. My counsel petitioned for an emergency accounting of all marital assets and a freeze on any further dissipation. The motion included 43 exhibits, forged signatures, bank metadata, sworn statements from the original escrow officer who confirmed the refinance documents had been altered post-execution. Tension thickened like static before a storm. My ex cancelled a scheduled mediation after receiving the motion, claiming sudden illness. Marcus tried to access the company QuickBooks from a coffee shop IP. The account had already been locked and mirrored by our team. Lauren posted a vague social media story about family betrayal and protecting what's ours, which my bodyguards screenshot within minutes. They were circling, desperate to locate me, but the new identity held like reinforced concrete. I stood in the townhome's kitchen that night, the low hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Manila envelopes containing the latest forensic updates lay neatly stacked on the quartz counter. The red blinking light of the interior camera system pulsed steadily above the door. For the first time in months, the knot in my stomach wasn't dread. It was anticipation. The quiet, professional certainty that their entire structure was hollow and about to be dismantled beam by beam. They had stripped me to nothing and expected gratitude for the scraps. Bubble Glee had handed me the tools to take everything back, plus interest measured in court costs, legal fees, and the complete destruction of their illusions of control. The fortress was built. The drawbridge was up. Now it was time to lower the portcullis on them. The paperwork drop hit on a crisp November morning like a silent guillotine. I watched the coordinated strike unfold from the secure townhome, secure tablet in my lap, Reyes standing at the window with his arms crossed. At 8:47 a.m., 3 separate process servers in plain clothes simultaneously served my ex at his temporary apartment, Marcus at his downtown office, and Lauren at the lake house where she had been living rent-free. The documents were thick, bound in crisp manila folders, stamped with federal case numbers. A civil complaint for financial elder abuse, conversion, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. a motion for full asset accounting and immediate freeze on all accounts tied to the marital estate. 30-day eviction notices on both the lake house and the commercial warehouse, citing forged deeds and unlawful occupancy. And a temporary restraining order barring all three from any contact with me, supported by 47 documented incidents of harassment logged by the Bodyguards and the Glee evidence vault. Carla's forensic accountant report formed the spine of every filing. $619,400 in misappropriated funds, traced through 29 wire transfers, 3 Delaware LLCs, a crypto wallet, and 17 unauthorized uses of the power of attorney. The signatures were blown up side by side with my verified exemplars. The differences screamed forgery under expert analysis. IP logs placed Marcus at the keyboard for the IRA drain. Lauren's cloud access timestamps proved post-lockout theft. The judge, who had once leaned toward their guardianship petition, now had no choice but to schedule an emergency hearing for the following week. They scrambled. My ex called every attorney he knew, his voice reportedly cracking on recorded lines we later obtained. Marcus tried to wire money out of the frozen accounts and received instant rejection notices. Lauren showed up at the old marital home address, now listed as abandoned, only to find a sheriff's deputy taping the eviction notice to the door. The flying monkeys went quiet overnight. The narrative they had spent months building collapsed the moment the court filings hit the public docket. Old friends who had ghosted me started texting the children, asking what the hell was going on. The children had no answer that didn't sound like panic. The hearing was brutal in its efficiency. I did not appear in person. Glee Council handled everything while I watched the remote feed from the townhome. Their side arrived late, dishevelled, no prepared counter-exhibits. Their attorney tried the same gaslighting script, claiming I was unstable, that the transfers were legitimate estate planning, that the children were only trying to protect me. Carla took the stand for 43 minutes. She walked the judge through the blockchain trail, the metadata on the forged refinance documents, the exact dates my ex had used the power of attorney while I was still living in the house, believing everything was fine. The judge's face hardened with every page turned. By the lunch recess, the temporary restraining order was granted for 1 year. All accounts linked to the marital business and my name were frozen pending full accounting. The lake house eviction clock started ticking. 30 days to vacate or face forcible removal. The warehouse tenants were notified that rent would now flow to the irrevocable trust. My ex's motion to dismiss was denied with prejudice. The guardianship petition? Withdrawn on the record after their own counsel admitted the supporting medical records had been incomplete. I sat on the couch in the townhome listening to the live audio feed, the scent of fresh coffee from the kitchen mixing with the faint ozone smell of the electronics. Reyes allowed himself the smallest nod when the judge issued the asset freeze. For the first time since the divorce papers landed on my doorstep, the cold fury inside me shifted into something sharper. Pure, professional satisfaction. The begging started that same afternoon. Lauren left a voicemail on the old number that played through the secure speaker. She was sobbing, saying she never meant for any of this, that Dad had pressured them, that they were terrified of losing everything, and just wanted to talk as a family. Marcus sent a long text through a cousin's phone, admitting the transfers had been a mistake driven by financial stress, and offering to return a portion if I dropped the civil suit. My ex's attorney reached out to mine, proposing mediation and hinting at a settlement north of $600,000 if we kept it out of criminal referral. Glee Council responded with one line: all future communication through the court. Any attempt at direct contact will be treated as a violation of the restraining order. I read every desperate message while the bodyguards logged them. No anger left in me now. Only the calm click of pieces falling exactly where they belonged. 2 weeks later, the sheriff's department executed the eviction at the lake house. I didn't go. Reyes showed me the body cam footage later that evening. Lauren standing on the dock in designer loungewear, mascara running, screaming at the deputies while movers loaded furniture she had no legal right to keep. Marcus tried to block access to the warehouse and received his own trespassing warning. The commercial tenants had already been redirected. The $14,700 monthly rent hit the trust account on the first business day of December. Their world shrank overnight. Frozen brokerage accounts meant missed mortgage payments on the apartment my ex had leased. The Range Rover Marcus loved so much was repossessed after the lease payments defaulted. Lauren's social media went dark. The flying monkeys vanished. The narrative of the poor, abandoned mother had flipped into public record. 3 adults who had systematically looted a 58-year-old woman's life savings and tried to institutionalize her to cover it up. I stood on the townhome balcony that night, December wind carrying the smell of distant wood smoke. A half-empty glass of bourbon sat on the railing, the red security light blinking steadily above the door. The irrevocable trust now held recovered assets approaching $700,000 and climbing, as Carla's team peeled back more layers. The new identity was ironclad. The bodyguards rotated with the same silent precision. They had tried to bury me alive and dance on the grave. Instead, the paperwork I had built with cold, methodical rage had buried them. And the best part, the part that still brings the faintest smile to my lips, was that I never raised my voice once. I simply handed the system the truth, and the system did what it does best when the evidence is airtight. It destroyed them. The final unraveling played out like a slow-motion audit no one could stop. By mid-January, the frozen accounts had triggered a cascade of defaults. The lake house went into foreclosure after 3 missed payments on the underlying mortgage that had secretly been shifted to my ex's name. The commercial warehouse tenants received certified notices from the trust's corporate trustee, terminating their leases effective the end of the quarter. My ex listed the apartment he'd been renting on a short-term basis. The brokerage statement Carla forwarded showed a balance of negative $11,000 after margin calls on the accounts he could no longer access. Marcus sold his leased Range Rover at a loss to cover mounting legal fees. Lauren quietly moved her things into a 1-bedroom unit in a complex that required first and last month's rent up front. Money she no longer had after the court ordered her to disgorge $184,000 in traceable transfers. I watched none of it in person. I didn't need to. The Bubble Glee portal delivered weekly forensic updates with attached public docket entries, sheriff's reports, and property records. The civil suit for financial elder abuse proceeded on summary judgment track. Their attorneys filed desperate motions for extensions, each one denied. The judge ultimately entered judgment in my favor for $742,000 in compensatory damages, plus attorney fees and punitive awards for the forged documents and attempted guardianship fraud. The irrevocable trust absorbed every recovered dollar, now north of $900,000, and growing as asset liquidation proceeded under court supervision. They tried one last approach in February. A process server delivered a handwritten letter to the controlled address Bubble Glee maintained for such things. My ex's handwriting, shaky now, begged for a meeting to talk as a family. Marcus added a postscript, claiming he had been manipulated. Lauren included a photo of the 3 of them looking hollow-eyed in what used to be our living room. The letter went straight into the evidence file as a restraining order violation. The court issued bench warrants for contempt. None of them served jail time, yet. But the message was delivered through counsel. Any further contact would escalate to criminal referral for elder financial exploitation, a felony in Georgia with real prison exposure. I never responded, not one word. The new identity had become my everyday reality by then. I lived in a quiet coastal town in South Carolina under the trust's ownership of a modest waterfront condo. The 5 bodyguards rotated on a schedule that felt invisible. Reyes still led the detail. The others I knew only by first names and calm competence. They swept the perimeter each morning, varied my routes, and maintained a permanent, no-contact bubble. No one from my old life could find me even if they hired professionals. The protected social security number, the rerouted mail, the flagged credit files. Bubble Glee had built a fortress no desperate family could breach. Some evenings I sat on the small balcony, with the salt air sharp in my lungs, a half-empty bourbon glass on the teak table, watching the tide move in slow, inevitable rhythm. The red blinking light of the security system above the sliding door kept its steady pulse. No more yellowed receipts scattered across motel beds. No more frantic calls from flying monkeys. Just the clean hum of a life rebuilt on my terms. I thought about them sometimes, not with pity or nostalgia, but with the detached satisfaction of an architect reviewing finished demolition plans. They had spent 32 years treating me as a walking ATM and a disposable matriarch. They forged my name, drained the retirement I funded, tried to lock me away in a facility so they could liquidate the rest. Now they faced judgments they could never discharge in bankruptcy, credit reports ruined for decades, and a public record that would follow them into every future loan application or background check. The construction company itself was being wound down under court oversight, its remaining value funneled back to the trust. Their luxuries were sold at auction. Their reputations, once polished in suburban Atlanta circles, now carried the stain of documented elder abuse. No tearful reunions, no holiday text threads, no final conversation where they apologized and I softened. The boundaries were steel reinforced and permanent. I had instructed my counsel to pursue full enforcement and criminal referral if any asset recovery lagged. Bubble Glee closed my file with a quiet commendation and an open door if I ever needed them again. I am 60 now. My days are simple and mine. Morning walks along the marsh with one bodyguard maintaining discreet distance. Afternoons managing the trust's conservative investments. Evenings reading or watching the water. The weight of 30 years of invisible labor finally lifted. The children I raised and the man I built a life with no longer exist in my world. They are ghosts who tried to kill me financially and emotionally, only to discover I had risen with sharper tools and colder resolve. Sometimes, when the tide is out and the light hits the water just right, I allow myself the smallest smile, the same one I wore the night the irrevocable trust documents were signed. Not joy, exactly. Not revenge in the screaming, dramatic sense. Just the profound, bone-deep satisfaction of cold justice executed perfectly. They stripped me of everything and expected me to disappear. Instead, I disappeared on my own terms, wealthier, untouchable, and finally, gloriously free. The paperwork won. The system delivered. And I get to live the rest of my life knowing they will never touch any part of it again.